The Enlightenment is a direct result of prior movements or eras in history, such as the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Scientific Revolution. And just like those things led up to the Enlightenment itself had a lasting legacy that continues on even to today, and things that we can see. There were advancements in the way people look at government. Science made an impact on the way people viewed politics and individuals, and how they saw even things like the economy. And we need to talk quickly about the legacy that the Enlightenment leaves on Europe, and then by extension on even us today. The first thing is a belief in progress. This progress comes in several different areas: progress of the individual, progress of the community as a whole. So what you see is a belief that humans could make their condition better by the use of reason, as Kant said. They could do certain things and take certain steps to improve themselves. We saw this practical ways during the years after the Enlightenment. An end of slavery, greater equality for people. It was one of the things that the enlightened despots dealt with was their inability to free the serfs, and so you have this equality come about that is an important legacy of the Enlightenment. We also see an increase in democracy. People started to question the divine right of monarchy theory, to say, you know what, maybe the kings and the queens and stuff, they don't have everything quite as put together as what they say they do. And so we start to see some revolutions and things take place. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Connected with this idea, even of divine right theory, you start to see a more secular outlook. People start to question whether or not God really put kings in place, or if that's just something that the people in power told them. So you start to see people questioning their religious beliefs in the church. Isaac Newton was a very religious man and a scientist, and he studied science and so that he could bring about, a new reverence for the things that God created. But other people read that and took it a different way and started to question what the church had taught them about God, and it changed their viewpoints in some ways. Science started to unravel some of the mysteries of the world. No longer did you need the church to fill in gaps with maybe some superstitious ideas or some things that didn't seem to fit. No longer a belief in demons and possessions and things like that to explain. But we start to see this over the years. It's not an immediate impact with any of these on a large scale, but we start to see it develop over time. And science started to unravel some of the mysteries of the world. Things like, the sun being the center of the universe, not universe to say now, but that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. The promotion of tolerance, and again, like I said, the end of fear and superstition. And the third thing we saw on a large scale was the rise of the individual. This has been a continuance since the Renaissance. The rise of the individual. We start to see the idea that people can use their own reason to judge right and wrong, and we saw that with Kant's quotation we used earlier. And then this idea again of government by the people. That people weren't always that people didn't always need to be guided by the church or the state, that they could make some decisions and things on their own. So again, these three legacies, vastly important. Belief in progress, a more secular outlook, and the rise of the individual. Another thing that we see is some political consequences. We've already talked about Frederick and Catherine and Joseph a little bit, but just to recap here, the philosopher king was the idea that enlightened, intelligent people should rule over the country or the society. These philosopher kings, these enlightened despots, supported tolerance and rule of law, social welfare, and education. They opposed privilege, the church, and nobility, at least in idea, but all three of them struggled with the nobility. Frederick and Catherine both were unable to free the serfs because they needed the nobility to stay in power. But the philosophes themselves, the philosophers, weren't active revolutionaries. They were people who thought about things. And so what happens is others take up their mantle, take up their ideas. And that's where we start to see the American revolutions, the Declaration of Independence. We see the French Revolution, when revolutionaries pick up these ideas, and they're people of action and not just people of ideas. So we see the end of the Enlightenment generally is viewed as the French Revolution. The extreme and senseless violence discredited the ideas of reason and tolerance. We'll talk about the French Revolution more in detail, but there was a really horrible period called the Terror, where it was really just senseless murder, and this was a first step to really people even starting to question the Enlightenment. The ideas never really go away. I still believe that these ideas, the education, the democracy, the equality, things like that, are very apparent in our society today. So they haven't gone anywhere. But I think we have a much more skeptical society. But really, I mean, in some ways, skepticism is a legacy of the Enlightenment itself. So it would come to reason that, skeptics would start to turn on the skeptics. And then lasting effects. We see the further decline of the church and the growth of secularism. The church doesn't go away, but it is just, it's put into the life of the individual to choose the religion. It's no longer a state-instituted thing, but rather a personal decision. And we start to see more liberal and humanitarian reforms, more ends of slavery. By the 1800s, Enlightenment itself may have come to an end, but we start to see Russia frees the serfs in the early 1860s. America frees the serfs in the mid-1860s. I say serfs, the slaves in America. But those are humanitarian movements, the end of the slave trade in the early 1800s. These are all just steps in that. You could argue even in the 1950s that the civil rights movement in America is even more liberal in humanitarian reform, and we still have reforms and a liberal agenda, if you will, to continue some of these movements. For good or bad. It's one of those things. Conservatives always try to put the brakes on, like, slow this down, we don't know where it's going, we need to take our time. Liberals are more like, look, we gotta go. And I've always compared that to a car. A car would be useless if you only had a brake pedal, and it would be dangerous if you only had a gas pedal. So in the conservative liberal viewpoint, the liberals would be the gas pedal for progress, and conservatives would be the brake pedal. And both of them are necessary. Both of them have their roles to play in keeping us moving forward, but at the same time not falling off a cliff. In terms of specific democratic revolutions that follow the Enlightenment period, or I guess early Enlightenment period, we see the English Revolution, or the English Civil War, as we've called it, from the 1640s to 1680s. The American Revolution, 1770s, is a very late Enlightenment. And then the French Revolution, 1780s and 90s. Europe in the 1950s, democratic revolutions. We start to see the fall of monarchs. Latin America in the 1980s. Middle Eastern revolutions, even to, present day. In 2010, 2011, we start to see the Arab Spring and democratic revolutions even in our own time. And so we need to make sure that we keep in mind that all of this is in the broader arc of history. This all is happening, it's all connected, and it's all based on things that we can take a little bit of time to learn more about.